Wherever you are around the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Dr. Nelson Ogunshakin from FIDIC, the CEO of FIDIC. You're welcome to the seventh of the series of FIDIC COVID-19 webinar. We're delighted once again to be back with you after 1 week break. We've had 6 seminars so far. That's been pretty good. Today we have another interesting chapter to cover. The topic today is really how lockdown is enabling more digital and remote working. So the world is moving from analog stage into digital world, partly because of COVID-19, but partly because this is the world is going. I bring you greeting from the FIDIC board. The rationale for this particular webinar is to look at the challenges that the industry is facing and to see how best we collectively as an industry leader can help to shape the way for the future. How we got here is questionable, but that is beside the point. What is important is the state of our industry, the state of health of individual and our profession. Lockdown, this is a language that everybody talks about. Exit strategy, how do we open up the market and make sure we are back in? The health and safety of our people, the well-being of our people, and the loss of families and lost ones around the world, to which we pay sincere condolence for those people who lost their world. We are where we are and we can't change the past, but what we can do collectively is to help to shape the future. Working digital, working remote is going to become the norm in future. And today's program is really going to focus on a number of speakers that we've invited around the world to share their thoughts and experiences and to actually help us to make sure that we can move forward with a very constructive mind. So my introduction will be very short. But what I'll do after the introduction is we introducing our president, who has been so kind, Bill Howard, to join us. After Bill's comment, then I will invite one of our stakeholders, who is Michele Kruger from South Africa, to say a few words about the topic in the widest context and to share our experience with us and how our company is coping with it. We then have 4 other speakers. Some of them are generalists, some of them are specific in the area of technology. Of course, BEAM is something that everybody talks about. It came before COVID, it's here during COVID, and will continue in the future. What does it mean? It's not just BEAM. Now we hear Zoom, we hear Team, we hear all sorts of things on how people can work remotely. And we are looking at it from the impact of the society and the impact to our industry. So those 4 speakers will speak after Michele. And thereafter, we hope to finish by 1 o'clock in the session of the panel discussion. We'll then have good half an hour of Q&A, which will take us from 1 o'clock to about 1:30. I hope those who are joining us will be able to stay with us throughout the whole program. I have got some interesting statistics that last time we had 996 people that joined us from 130 countries around the world. So I hope those who are joining us from wherever you are can continue and stay with us throughout the whole period. So on this point, I'm going to invite our president, Bill Howard from the United States, to say a few words. Bill, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson, and I will be very brief. First of all, I would like to thank you, Nelson, and the Secretariat of FIDIC for putting these webinars together under very difficult circumstances with people working from home. It really is one of the subjects that the subject we're talking about today, but so far the webinars have gone very, very well, and there's been a lot of work put in by the Secretariat staff, and we very much appreciate it. I'd also like to thank personally Michele for taking time to moderate this particular session, and to thank our 4 speakers. They're a diverse group, and we're very much looking forward to hearing their comments on working remotely and the lessons that we're learning, which are going to take us, I think most of us would agree, these lessons are going to take us well into the future, well beyond these tragic times that we're living in now with the virus. We're getting a peek, I believe, at how a lot of our work is going to take place in the future. And the implication of that is enormous change. So the subject is certainly timely. So we have, as Nelson mentioned, quite a few people registered from, I understand, about 100 different countries, which is just incredible. And I'm very much looking forward to the presentations and the question and answer section. And we'll turn it back to Nelson now with my thanks. Nelson?
Thank you very much, Bill. Thanks for your leadership as always, and it's a pleasure to have you on board. Sometimes I feel really guilty having to get you up in the morning, but you seem to do it better than all of us. So thank you, Bill. I might probably call you back later on. It is my delight really to introduce Dr. Michele Kruger, who is joining us from South Africa, and she heads our diversity and inclusion group, but she also has another key role. She's one of the professors of delivering our Future Leaders program, and she's been through the Future Leaders program over the years. So Michele, the floor is yours. You have 5 to 6, 10 minutes to give us your take on the subject. Michele, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nelson. Thank you everybody for joining us in this session. It's an honor to be able to speak to you today. So a bit about my personal experience during this time. Like most of you, the arrangement around meetings has just been incredible. The fact that, as Nelson mentioned, we have Zoom, we have Microsoft Teams, we have Skype, all these meeting options has really created in my personal life a lot of extra time. And I can tell you in future, I'm going to insist on a lot more Zoom meetings. When I look at productivity, even here in South Africa, the connectivity has been excellent, and we've been able to connect via VPN to our work product. But even more so, if I look at productivity, it's actually increased because there's a lot of families that are now able to schedule their time around their children, around dinner, these type of activities. So now people are able to schedule more, shall we say, productivity, to be more productive. So when we also look at work productivity, in my experience, I found that now you will need to be able to monitor and evaluate productivity, looking at your products a lot more closely. And maybe an option to look into is looking at dashboarding so that all the teams are able to view the productivity, the project schedules, and etc. So when we look at being able to advance our staff, one of the great realizations that have come across my desk is the fact that many academia have now made it free to be able to do any type of training. Even this particular webinar that you're looking at, if you consider that you are gaining a skill, we are now able to be very specific about the training of our staff, not necessarily how we used to do it in a traditional sense. And a lot of extra skills are now open to our staff. From a personal point of view, I'm very proud to say that being a professor or trainer for the FIDIC Future Leaders training program, this COVID-19 instance has actually not made any difference at all. I'm very proud to say that we've had very good connectivity from all around the world, so I hope you're encouraged by that. And our students have been able to upload all their assignments without any problems. So having set the scene already with previous training in the FIDIC sphere for this young management training program, the only question now is to say, if there's going to be a FIDIC conference, say virtually or not, or how do we just handle the FIDIC portion of the training program? As you may know, we've changed the training for this year so that there is the option of not having the conference attendance, just to make it a bit more cost effective for our students. So in this way, I'm very proud to say the training has gone on without a glitch. Thank you, Nelson.
Thank you very much, Michele, from that personal perspective. I mean, I think the key word that I keep on hearing is that we are moving from analog, world into a digital world. That's the quite fundamental. And we're going to have a new norm, which will impact our industry. So far, we are talking about 4G. When we get into 5G and the issue about, drone and using these technologies, when they all come together, it will help to shape our industry. And somehow, because we're in the intellectual capacity building, so it's very important to make sure that at least, as the technology moves, we're able to move along that area. I know BIM is a subject that's been spoken about well before COVID-19, and this is how we work contractually and how we deliver assets, which I know for sure that the industry is asking us to be more enabling our thinking. This takes me to the point of inviting Richard Shennan, who is the Group Digital Business Development Director for Mott, to give us his view on the subject of working from home and using the best technology, both in terms of BIM and all other systems that we're using. So Richard, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Nelson. Hello to everybody, and it's a great honor to be speaking to you at this time. My role in MacDonald fundamentally is to connect innovation to outcomes. By outcomes, I mean ultimately sustainable outcomes, enhanced social, economic, and environmental outcomes. And that is the purpose of what we do. So to connect innovation to outcomes means using the best of digital technology to drive better performance, both in construction and operation of infrastructure assets, pursuing outcomes. So that remains my focus. And in fact, I'm doubling down on that focus and looking at how we can move forward. Our organization has had a huge transformation and a rapid transformation. And to me, this is a great opportunity because a lot of the things we've been trying to do in digital transformation have accelerated very, very quickly. Digital behaviors have been taken up. Those small barriers that people put in the way to not work digitally have been blown away by the imperative. We've gone from having several hundred offices to having thousands of offices distributed around the organization, and they are all interconnected. So connectivity becomes key. And I think thinking about the purpose of the exchange of information becomes central. How are we spending our time? For what purpose? How are we using technology to collaborate and focus more precisely in how we use our time in pursuit of enhanced outcomes? So connectivity is what brings me around to thinking about BIM. It's all about information. For me, ever since we started with the BIM journey in MacDonald, this is going back over 10 years, information has been central to everything we do. And taking that forward, looking at new developments through life modeling, digital twins, and so on, information is still central. So sharing and collaborating around a single set of information becomes more critical than ever. The organization of information is difficult. Most large organizations, infrastructure owners, consulting engineers around the world are still struggling to get their own information organized. It tends to be distributed in different places, different owners, inconsistencies, duplications, inaccuracies, to the point where people don't necessarily even trust the information that's put in front of them. But as we work in the digital world, connected remotely, information, the accuracy, and the use of dashboards, as Michele has already alluded to, becomes fundamental to better decision making. And it's only through better decision making that we're actually going to drive enhanced outcomes. So if we look at information and an information-centric world, that brings us around to thinking about what that means for BIM. In BIM, we've been talking about common data environments for many years. We now want to put that front and center, and certainly within MacDonald, we're implementing an information strategy. We're making ourselves an information-centric organization, and we're adopting an information strategy at the highest level in the organization, because working around good information, sharing good information requires another step change in behavior. So we've seen kind of step one in behavior, people getting used to the basic digital tools, people having to focus for themselves on the purpose of what they're saying and what they're doing and communicate more effectively. And I think we've seen positive benefits from that through use of some of the technologies that have already been talked about, teams and so on. But when we talk about BIM and collaboration in pursuit of projects and operational performance of assets, that collaboration needs to extend beyond our organization to a whole collection of organizations that need to be able to work around common information. We've seen steps going in that direction as well. And certainly in FIDIC, we're already starting to put together a strategy to rethink project delivery process as a series of information exchanges. You can plot a digital thread through the whole of a project, from why am I building this in the first place, with what objective, what additional benefit I'm intended to bring, through the planning, through the design, through the execution, through the handover, and through the incorporation into an existing system. Information is a thread that runs all the way through. And what we all do as participants is we create, add value to, and exchange information. The perfect project has each party, each participant, ranging from the highest level consultant to the practical person that knows how things actually fit together on site, providing information into a common framework, and that information is then extracted and used for decision support all the way down the project from, am I going to build it? Is it approved? Is the budget set? Am I going to dig a hole? Am I going to hand it over? And am I going to switch it on and set it to work? So an information-centric view of the world is where I'm going in our own organization. It's what I'm seeing as being enabled and accelerated by the digital transformation that we've seen happening through remote working. And it's also where we're taking our focus in FIDIC, because all of the other things that surround projects, contracts, risk apportionment, deliverables and so on, are effectively all tied together by the same common thread of information. So that's my thinking, Nelson, around this topic, that information is the common thread that draws us all together, and digital is the way to deliver it.
Thank you very much, Richard. That's a very good high-level input on that. I think the key message I picked up about, you talk about the common data environment, and you talk about information strategy, and you said moving from digital, from the analog into digital, which is quite interesting. And all of that is actually coming through in the collaboration manner. So those are the big subjects that I picked up. I'm sure that we will have the opportunity to come back and dive into that specifically later on. At this point, I'm going to invite Adam, who is a chief executive of a company and based in Poland, is able to join us to share his view as to how they're reacting to the idea of working, from home. This is a new one, or working remote, wherever you are in the world. Adam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nelson. It's an honor to talk to you all. As Nelson mentioned, I'll be talking to you from a perspective of a small, medium business owner executive. We employ around 100 professionals on 25 projects in Poland. We have some projects in the Ukraine and a project in Romania. And I would like to talk through of how the challenges of the last 8 weeks for us have impacted our working and our digital and remote environment that we live in today. So I'll go through this by using the corporate governance structure of stakeholders to describe each stakeholder and how they've been affected. So I'll start with our local communities. So in Poland and in our business, we've experienced that local communities have, let's say, it's a fashion now and it's become a trend to support local business. The delivery of products like office supplies has not changed because we were already delivering on site and into our office remotely. So ordering remotely, this hasn't had that much of an impact when it comes to digital work. So communities have been, I think, the impact with communities have been large when it comes to COVID, but been small when it comes to the changes of how we interact with communities. When it comes to investors, well, being a family-owned business, let's say the approach to our business hasn't changed. 80% of our time right now is focused on cash flow and securing cash flow and thinking about what's going to happen next year and in 2 years. But our interactions are done via Teams, via our online platforms. And now for the big changes, I would say it happened to government, customers, and employees. So for government, I have to say that Poland was quite well prepared when it comes to electronic interaction with the government, whether it comes to electronic tenders or signing tax documents using certified electronic signatures. Well, this has become a norm. It was already available before COVID. And now for our business, we used to do it a traditional paper way, and now the board or employees, we all sign our documents electronically using either a bank verification process or a USB certified electronic signature. So the government, I think, was quite well prepared from a practical perspective to help conduct business. When it comes to customers, well, this was a drastic shift for our company. We closed our main office 8 weeks ago. Our site offices are still open, but I have limited workflows on site. Only the people required by law and by our contracts are there. All the support personnel is working from home. What's interesting, and I think something that maybe people listening to this webinar can implement on their projects, is we gave our customers, especially on small and medium projects, free access to our cloud project management tool that we have, a US outside software that we use in our company. And this was met with great applause from our customers and helped us build a relationship with them where there are certain elements of our agreements that COVID has been limiting, where this has provided a solution to interact with customers and keep doing payment certificates, discussing plans, producing technical documents and reviewing them via this online project management tool in the cloud. And they are enjoying it, and I have to say they are supporting it. And whether it comes even large clients in Poland like the road agency or the national railway agency, they all encourage limiting meetings, limiting number of participants in meetings, and the work has been continuing. So the construction has never stopped in Poland. Of course, operational issues have arrived, but this digital and online service via Microsoft Teams and Basecamp, which is the software, has helped us operate. Contractual issues, of course, evidence collection via drone has become more common, even in the last 8 weeks, where certain parties were not willing to accept drone footage before. Now they are willing to do that, which is also a nice change. Monthly meetings are done online. A case study from my company is that, for example, we won a tender, a tender to produce tender documentation around 1 month ago, or no, 9 weeks ago. And we signed our contract electronically without ever meeting the client face-to-face 8 weeks ago. Then we produced the tender package when it comes to formal documents. And all of this was done via Microsoft Teams and using this online project management tool where lawyers, engineers, the client held review sessions together. And even the invoice, of course, was sent using an electronic signature. So none of us had to leave our house in order to deliver this small service. So it's just an example of how drastic the changes are, because usually to produce such a thing, it would require at least 4 or 5 business trips and meetings to do. I think the most impacted stakeholder in this entire COVID situation are our employees, because we had to close our main office and they all work from home. The software that I mentioned, we've been using for 5 years already. So they had practice with the software, but we were still all working face-to-face. A year and a half ago, we produced this decree that all our employees have to do one day a week to work remotely. And so till Friday, they would say what day in the next week they work remotely, other than Mondays, because we believed back then, only 8 weeks ago, we believed that we have to meet on Mondays face-to-face with everybody, because it's the only way we can keep running our business forward to make sure we have control, which COVID showed that is not so. And I have to give kudos to my employees that this working remotely has worked tremendously well. Our productivity has gone up. They are delivering just as good of a job as they were when they were physically present. So I think this crisis situation has verified trust both ways. So the employee has to trust the employer that he won't limit salary, engagement, and so on. And the employer has to trust the employee that working from home doesn't mean not working, which I think has had a big paradigm shift, especially in our company. So I think to sum up, the Microsoft Teams is what we started using since COVID, and this software, cloud project management software that tracks documents, planning, tasks, has been a tremendous success in the last 8 weeks. And I lack, of course, and miss the physical presence, which I hope will come back, but I think it will never return quite to the same norm as it has till before that. And on this part, I would also like to mention to everybody the FIDIC Future Leaders, because that's how I started with FIDIC. And we also meet online for the last, I think, 6 years. We've been producing things online, and it also was an experience that we were already ready to work online when this COVID thing happened. So it's whatever engagement you have with FIDIC is inspirational, and even for small and medium businesses like myself, it gives you the courage to work remotely, use digital, not be afraid of international tenders, because a lot of things can be done, as I said, with this tender documentation in a short time using remote software. So that's a very short summary of each of the stakeholders and how it was impacted my business. So thank you very much, Nelson, and I'm open to questions later, of course. Nelson, unmute your mic, I think.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I said thank you very much for that stakeholder approach to looking at the issues You started by looking at the local community. You go on to the investors. You talked about the government. You talked about the contractor. You looked about, the industry as a customers, and you also your employee, and look at the industry body. So that FIDIC, that's quite interesting. And I've got a few questions to come back to you later on, Adam, looking through that, even though you are a small to medium-sized company. But I think at this point, it'd be interesting. We've heard from Richard, who's looking at it from Mott, and that's a big company from 100 offices to 1,000 offices. We've heard from Adam, said, we're very much country-based. We're doing all sort of work, with employee about 100 to 150. Now I'm going to bring Dustin Parkman in from Bentley system, which, I've heard the word digital twins several times in all the languages I've heard, and I've attended a number of their programs in different parts of the world, and they are one of those leaders in the market of looking at, how do we, develop our capability in the sort of digital world. So Dustin Parkman, can I invite you to take the floor? Dustin, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nelson, and thank you for letting me be a part of this. I'm honored to be here. So at Bentley, our focus is building software and solutions for engineering, contractors, and owners to essentially build and maintain the world's infrastructure. And so for many years now, we've been talking about going digital and digital twins. So you could almost say that we're in the business of going digital, so to speak. And so my own experience at this work from home, everything shut down. We really didn't skip a beat as a company. We were already kind of prepared for this. We already had a good digital strategy internally. And so my role at Bentley is I look after our project delivery division. And so our project delivery division kind of focuses on the CDEs, or common data environments, for engineering, for construction, for capital program and project management from an owner's perspective. So this is really kind of in my core of what we try to do and help our users and customers actually provide the platforms and backbones for collaborating. Now, what we've seen since all of this started around the world is that users who had a good going digital strategy really were able to be really effective. And what I mean by that is, so some of the telemetry that we actually measure based on productivity is the hours that people are actually using the tools that make them effective. So they're kind of workhorse tools for BIM, for design. And you can definitely tell by looking at that data which countries and which sectors of the market segment were actually most effective. A lot of your large global engineering companies, you could really tell they didn't really skip a beat, but certain smaller firms, particularly in certain countries where they didn't have a good work from home policy at a country level or at a provincial level, they really got caught flat-footed by this. And so there was a period of time where we saw productivity make a significant drop. But now we've started to see that rebound, and the result of that rebound is actually those countries and corporations actually putting in that policy and preparing themselves for this. So I think there's a lot to learn from this, and I think a lot of organizations, like I said, got caught flat-footed, and so now they're basically going from this analog to digital world, making sure they have good work from home policy, making sure that their colleagues have the right tools, whether that be computers and hardware, to actually work from home effectively, so that they don't have this air gap of productivity. So what we've seen as a software solution provider is, over the past few weeks, the appetite for digital collaboration tools has gone through the roof. We've heard everyone talk about Microsoft Teams and Zoom and others. We've been working with those platforms, and so we're kind of in the same business, but we really kind of focus on the practitioners that are actually having to do the engineering, they're having to do the construction, and the people that are having to manage capital program management. So, I'll give you an example. We've been talking about drones and doing drone-based survey and creating reality models and digital twins for several years now. And the way we originally kind of positioned that was for the most part, for efficiency and safety, allowing people not to have to be in the field, be able to do their jobs remotely. But now it's more about an element of potential necessity that you may need to do that. And the same is true for digital construction in the field. The more things that we can do actually remotely, and the tools that are being provided to actually enable that can help a lot. And in fact, we just launched a new platform 2 weeks ago, which is our ProjectWise 365 cloud-based SaaS platform. And we were originally already planning on launching that this spring, but we expedited that due to the fact that we knew so many people needed it, and we basically are offering that as a free service for this period of time to allow particular teams that really didn't have the tools at their disposal to do effective design reviews, collaboration, construction correspondence, and things like that. And so this platform can integrate with Microsoft Office and Teams, so allowing you to leverage the collaboration platforms that you already have. So that's what we've seen so far. So there does seem to be a massive appetite for digital collaboration, and I think you're seeing a lot of organizations retool as a result of it.
Thank you very much, Dustin. Thanks for that input, looking at it from product side of it. I mean, I like the ProjectWise 365 that you talked about. It would be interesting to see how that comes through. I'm also keen to see, how your digital strategy, particularly looking at the collaborative platform you talked about. I know that Bentley's always talked about, going digital for a long time. The point you raised about before it's about efficiency and now safety, but become necessity. That becomes a big issue. The word necessity means that you still have to produce. And I do like the idea of looking at the dashboard. At this point, I'm going to try and invite Nick, who, of course, one of the larger organization with multi-office, multi-site, as the digital director for Atkins, to share his experience and how things have been done in Atkins. Hopefully we can learn some stuff from there. Nick, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much, Nelson. So during this terrible time and so much bad things that are happening, a lot of us have heard the phrase, never waste a good crisis. And the bizarre thing that's happened is us digital folk or us BIM folk have now become rock stars. I've never been so popular in my organization as I have now. So the president, the chairman, they all know who I am and they've all got me on speed dial. So that is showing that we've really in this space now where we have to make the most and drive home the opportunity that this terrible time gives us in regards to transforming our industry. Just giving the Atkins journey, I was just plotting out, what we've done from the very beginning to where we are today. And I'll give you a quick potted history of that. When this came in and we all started to work from home, following what some of our colleagues have said earlier, in countries such as the US, the UK, etc., nothing changed. We just started delivering and our productivity stayed the same. In fact, what we found was a slight reduction in productivity in the first week. I think as people trying to get used to living and working from home and childcare issues, not a technological issue. And that has had a big bounce. Now, actually, our productivity has improved compared to when we were working all from offices. So I think that's a really important point. Countries such as India, where we have a large presence, yes, that was harder. And we've had to, lots of our staff, for instance, didn't have laptops, computers to work from home. And we've had to deal with that. And we've had to deal with the software issues. But where that would often take us a year to fix something like this and get a program sorted, it was fixed within 2 weeks. So it just goes to show when we need to, invention, mother of necessity, that we can make that big difference. So in terms of our journey, once we were up and running, which was incredibly quick, the first thing I did was get my team together to provide guidance to our staff on how to deliver digitally and how to deliver. And that goes from how best to use Teams, such as we've heard, but also how best to use tools such as ProjectWise we've heard mentioned, and all the other tools. And understanding that for some of our staff, this just comes second nature and they're doing best practice delivery, a huge amount. But for another whole section of our staff, they are used to working in an office all the time, and they are more used to a 2D CAD world or a paper world. So we have to provide the guidance for them to be able to make sure things like drawings, they can check their drawings easily, and to be able to do the quality work, and the quality didn't drop associated to that. So the guidance had to be across from the digitally immature, if you like, through to the digitally mature. Along this period over the last few weeks, we've been doing lots of spot surveys of our staff to understand the pain points that they're suffering, to make sure that we can actually come in and help them to be able to deliver. And the big thing that came out of it in terms of the support that our staff wanted was they wanted help from our experts. So we kind of put a huge amount of effort into our champions network now. So we have our champions providing that guidance. We're running every week technical clinics for people on how to use the software, for instance, whether it's Bentley software or Autodesk software, and providing mentoring to our staff. And also rolling out our training platforms, because in terms of training, the amount of classroom training we've done is reduced and reduced, as well as everybody over the years, and nearly all our training has been put online. It's just now that people can understand it, now they see it, and now they're implementing it. So I think there's a whole conversation to be had how training is changing. In regards to our clients, one of the blockers our staff said in terms of delivery was not so much our technical capability, but those of some of our clients. So we've had to put a lot of effort into supporting them. And whether that's basic stuff such as getting them on Teams or getting them being able to join teleconferences, etc., through to online tools like Miro, who some of you have used to run virtual workshops, because loads of us get together in rooms, we have workshops with our clients, we use sticky notes and we put them on whiteboards and we do that type of work. Well, how do we run that in the virtual world? And there are tools like Miro that we found to be absolutely brilliant. And already now our teams and the client teams are now doing workshops virtually. And that's been a big change for lots of our clients and our own teams. So how we work with our clients is changing. And that leads then to the final bit I wanted to talk about, which is this whole thing around virtual design. That's the title of our guidance, has been around virtual design delivery. And how do we utilize the best-in-class tools, whether it's Bentley's E365 with ProjectWise, using tools like iModel Hub, whether it's Quadri, NovaPoint from Trimble, or BIM 360 from Autodesk. We have to get the rapid adoption now of these web-enabled cloud tools to allow us to collaborate virtually in a real-time basis, right from the very beginning of the project through the whole project lifecycle. So in regards to what you call the digital twin, I see the digital twin being from the early survey work, and how do we take a point cloud, for instance, and how then do we use that to rehearse the design, and then to rehearse the construction with our construction partners, because they're all virtual, and we're already working with the big contractors like Balfour Beatty or Lang, and actually rehearsing our design and rehearsing the construction before they're getting on site, and reducing the amount of people who go on site, through to utilizing that asset information model, if you like, into the operating phase and your operational digital twin. And underpinning all that is this information management layer. How do we deal with our information management, and what is our data structure to allow us to manage all that data? So kind of in conclusion, the journey has been, one is now's the time, our big opportunity that we're never going to get as a digital community, that we have to make the most of. We're doing things that would usually take us half a year to agree in several days. And the big push now is getting our clients with us, working collaboratively in the models through the whole project lifecycle, and reducing the amount of man hours or per person hours we need to actually spend face to face together. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that insightful way of looking at it from Atkins' point of view. I mean, we've had the opportunity to go through different sides of company. I think at this point, before I open the question out to the floor, I just like maybe I can just maybe bring some activity to play within FIDIC itself. You know, very much like you, when I came in about 18 months ago, we were still having the server system within the office. We went cloud. We invested quite a lot of money on making sure that we can actually access our data offsite. And before you know it, when COVID-19 came into play, very quickly we moved from office into our own individual place, and we're able to organize more meetings, get things done, including establishing this program. And that's been very, very, very easy because we thought about it. The question I really want to start off with the floor before I open it up to others from the floor is very much, people talk about having collaborative data environment. What does that mean in real sense? Because our industry is very renowned to this idea that we work in silo, our industry is fragmented. And this question is very much to Richard, in the sense that traditionally we are known that we are not that as productive as we should be. And now we are now trying to work in a collaborative manner. And sharing data is very, very important. But actually, how you collect the data, how you describe the data, how you destruct the data, and getting everybody on the same framework and having a contractual relationship that enable people to be accountable for changes down the line is one of the key things to unlock it. So if I start off with Richard and said, how do you get the team together to think in a very strategic manner? I know within Mott, you've been able to move your business from analog into a digital world. How do you embrace that, talking to client and collaborator to come on board? Richard, first question to you.
Great. Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I think first of all that there are some foundational questions about information, such as security. So this is something that needs to be resolved because it's something that always comes up quite quickly. So the ability, the willingness to work collaboratively, especially once one goes outside of the organization, means that questions of security need to be addressed. And this is also a question to do with the maturity of the collaborative partners, because there are still quite a lot of people out there who think their information is more secure if they've got it on servers that are kind of locked in a cupboard, than if they're in a kind of well-structured, secure, kind of cloud-based environment. This is a mindset thing. It's about people's sort of feeling really about things that are out there in the cloud, and just a kind of almost a sort of gut reaction that they must be somehow less secure. Whereas of course, if you've got servers, they might well be locked into your own little space, but actually they're just as accessible as if they were anywhere else. So I think security is an absolutely fundamental issue. So the ability to exchange information, and certainly the way that we are structuring our approach to platform for digital twin, which is extendable, is to look at a structure around a series of interconnected digital twins, high quality API interconnections, which establish that fundamental trust and security around data sharing. So I think that is very, very important. There's then another foundational thing around, you could call it ontology, taxonomy, calling things the same thing, just to put it into simple terms. And there's an awful lot of work going on around this area. And I mean, there has been for many years with things like, uniclass, omniclass, and so on. There's a school of thought that needs, this won't be solved until everyone is calling everything the same thing. But, this is a bit of a sort of a long shot, really, I think, because just the likelihood of achieving that in practical human terms is relatively low. But there's another school of thought which is talking about more automation and recognition, so that you don't have to be quite so precise about how you exactly refer to something, and the technology itself will be able to kind of sort things out behind the scenes, so that becomes more of a practical proposition. And I think that next step in technology is going to make that kind of a lot easier. And then the third point I'd make really is about organizations themselves. If you look at the way information is organized within organizations, within an enterprise, it tends to follow traditional lines that have been set up, you know, maybe for other reasons. You have to departmentalize and break down a large organization in order for it to be able to function. And that has responsibilities, line management, budgets, a whole lot of things go down those kind of verticals. So traditionally, information has also been aligned down those same verticals, which means that it sort of becomes inherently disconnected, and even the ownership of the information can, in some organizations, end up being seen as something they want to hang on to. So looking at an organization from an information-centric point of view, and we've certainly done this with a lot of clients, you get a whole lot of different internal stakeholders within an organization with different responsibilities. And if you take an infrastructure asset, you know, the basic thing is operation and capital. You know, we all know from bitter experience, you know, how disconnected most infrastructure organizations, public and private, are between those whose responsibilities are capital and those that are operational. Reconsidering that organization from an information-centric point of view means that people start to interact in new ways. They have to sort of give up some of their hoarding of information, but at the same time, they can benefit from common shared information. So I think there's an organizational structural thing as well as a technology thing that needs to come together to deliver those benefits. Nelson, just as an introductory few comments on your question.
Thanks very much, Richard, on that. And I just wondered, Dustin, do you have a view on that particular same subject, Dustin?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that we've been seeing with common data environments over the past couple of years is, you know, for probably the last 5 or 6 years, you've seen a very big document-focused mentality, all about semantic-rich data, adding the attribution to documents, and it's been more about how you structure the information at a contractual handover milestone, what the owner actually or the client actually wants to receive. So what we've seen since then is everyone's starting to embrace this idea of a CDE or a common data environment, and you're ending up with different common data environments for different types of practitioners. There's an engineering kind of work in progress common data environment. There's a capital program or project management CDE, which is more owner focused about what they're supposed to read based on what the definition in the contract is. And the same is true for construction, which is not quite as mature as the engineering and the owner side, but it is getting there, where they're actually starting to think about, from a construction standpoint, how do they structure their own information, so for when they hand back over for their either commissioning or their inspection and surveys, that it makes sense to the owner. So that's one trend that we're seeing, you know, that, you know, all the supply chain is starting to get on board with the idea of a CDE. And then the next thing that we're seeing, which is, you know, still in its infancy, is this idea of a CDE being the management of a digital twin. And so I mentioned that most CDEs today are very document oriented, document naming conventions, metadata definitions that go along with documents. And so the transition that we're starting to see, it's almost like a pendulum, where the digital twin is actually adding this overlay of spatial context, whether that be survey information from the field, whether that be 3D BIM data, whether that be any type of GIS information. So you end up with this spatial digital twin. And so because of all the metadata that we've been putting in our CDEs from a document standpoint, and you have all these 3D, 4D, 5D artifacts, you can now start to take that metadata and stitch it together so that people can start to look at information in much more of a spatial context rather than a document folder context. How to find information. There's been lots of studies about most of the time wasted is just trying to find the right information at the right time. And so the digital twin is actually providing a better index of how to find information. So particularly when you're building something or constructing something, dealing with physical space and going to that physical space and being able to light up that space with information and analytics is really kind of powerful, right? It's a huge productivity gain. And so all of that work that organizations have been doing probably for the last 10 years on getting their own organizations very disciplined about how to structure information, how to produce which deliverables at which time, how to compile and collate that for contractual handover, is really kind of helping the digital twin, because you have all of that, so it's not lost, and that allows you to basically kind of shift from a document-centric world to a data-centric world.
Okay. Thanks very much. Nick, suddenly you are now the rock star of the company. I like that. You know what they said, that you never know what you've got until it's gone. You haven't gone. Your value proposition is now skyrocketed, within the company. And when you get to a point where the CEO and the president are chasing you, you become a business critical. You did mention that you have two classes of people that you really have to engage. One are people who are really business as usual, and they're very savvy. And then the others are more or less newer into that. Was it difficult to overcome those who are not familiar with working digital? And your manual that you produce, your guidance note, how was that being implemented through them?
Yeah, one thing I'd say is it's been so helpful for us in the change, because a lot of, for many years, the last 10 years, you've had people who've picked up the ball and who've run with it and who've really adopted this and got excited. And you did have a bit of the laggard situation with people who put their head in the sand, who didn't want to change. And all of our organizations, no matter how big or small, you'll have people who fit in those camps. And what this has done is meant that those people can't stick their head in the sand. They had to raise it, otherwise they wouldn't have a job. It is as simple as that. So all of a sudden, you've got interest from 100% of people as opposed to maybe 40 or 50% of people. But we can't expect them to all be using digital twins and everything else overnight. So we have to have a twin track, if you like, approach to how we bring those people up. And that goes from really basic stuff, as I mentioned, from marking up in a model as an engineer to much more advanced solutions. So I think it's the guidance that we have to give them, but also we have to give them the training. And I think, as I said, most importantly, it's the champions and the mentoring to help those people to do it. And that is a lot of effort, isn't it? Because you're dealing with, in our organization, who just in the UK and Europe, we're 10,000 people. So if we just said half of those people, that's 5,000 people. You're trying to bring all those people up to the same level, which is a big challenge for, I think, all of us now going forward. Is we've whet the appetite. How do we sustain this growth in the opportunity going forward, so we don't revert backwards?
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to pick up a question from the floor. There's a number of questions to Adam. So I said my question is to Adam. And I think if I read it, he mentioned cloud-enabled project management software. Is this an in-house system or a commercially available system that can be shared? What is the name of the product, Adam? This is
it's a commercially available product called Basecamp. And it's what we did is we implemented Basecamp because it allows you to customize the structure of it, let's say. So we have an in-house customized structure on Basecamp. That's the answer, I think, to the question.
Right, okay, there's another one there for, I think this is for Dustin. Bentley system, can you please give me more information about your new project-wide 365 software? This is not meant to be delivered on this particular platform, but can you tell us a little bit more about that system, if you can, Dustin, a little bit?
Sure. So the closest analogy I can come up with, ProjectWise is a platform for integration that we've had for a very long time, right? That's been around, it's true, and there have been lots of testimonials about it. ProjectWise 365 is a new version of ProjectWise that is meant particularly to be focused around collaboration, design reviews, markups, issue resolution, and RFI construction correspondence. And it's a true SaaS-based solution, so it's meant to be instant on. So the difference is, if anyone who wants to use it can get up and start using it today with a small work group. You don't have to make an enterprise level decision. So that was kind of our thinking behind making this available, waiving all the subscription fees until September 30th of this year. So that's the idea.
Okay, Dustin, we might need to come to you and see how we can work with you to get that to the market. There is a question that's coming all the way from Uganda. It says, my name is Anthony from Uganda. Digital and remote working come at a cost to a certain extent. How do we address this to decline since they are equally hit with the pandemic? And again, how sustainable is this mode of communication vis-a-vis keeping within project budget line? My question is to Nick Toon. Nick, I think that's a question directed to you.
I think it's kind of back to the same point, is we've got no choice. In before, it was a case of opt-in, opt-out, but for clients as well as everybody else. But now if the client wants to be productive and have whatever that is for them designed, built, constructed and operated, they have to engage these, they have to engage their supply chain digitally. So I think the onus is on us as a community to support them to be able to do this. To help them to be able to understand the processes and the technology, but most importantly, their people and our people to be able to help achieve that. And just tying it into another point, I think, which is a really interesting one around a question somebody just posed earlier, which is around outsourcing, if you like, for the client and for ourselves, and can we now do that across the globe because we're all digitally connected? And I think that's a really fundamental point. The client doesn't necessarily need us anymore sitting in their office, because we used to have that requirement. Some clients would say, you must come and work from our office. But that doesn't need to happen now, because we've proven we can all deliver wherever we are. So does that mean the world has become, we're much more global now? The world's become even smaller? Whilst we're not flying anywhere, I can deliver a project for you in Uganda, or you can deliver a project for me from Uganda to UK. In fact, we've been doing it for years with India, but now everyone's realizing this possibility. So I think actually for a client, their whole world is changing. We're much more digitally, we're much more able to deliver no matter where we are. And hopefully that means we pick the best athlete for the job, no matter where they're located.
Thank you. I have a question coming out from Kitty Cohen. I think I know who she is. She said, digitization is the fourth industrial revolution that will change the nature of work and that become reality and was pushed forward by COVID-19. The only problem that I see is how to make the information system more efficient and affordable, make this available in fragile states and to women. So who feel like taking that on? Michele?
Thank you, Nelson. Absolutely. Maybe also coming back to what we're saying, and a question I saw from Mandana as well, is ultimately this is going to be about productivity. So we've now spoken about the fact that there is a trust, there is the capability of being productive. I think now it's coming through to being able to schedule the time properly, making sure there's access for everyone regarding the information, but then also taking this information further. As we've said before in the team, that it's a lot of information. So instead of working towards documentation, using all this information through to dashboarding. I think this is very important, not only when we're looking at our own companies and our productivity and the availability of information. I think once we've now convinced clients that we are able to work remotely, we are able to monitor our information through dashboards, it's maybe now the time to speak to clients to be brave enough to make this information available, for example, online through their own data monitoring. And let me name an example. One of the important things in my field is to be able to do online monitoring regarding wastewater effluent qualities. So up to now, clients will on occasion do sampling, say whatever time step. Now it's actually possible to have, through online monitoring, composite sampling, all of those things, to have a real-time feel of the data. Okay, so once again, you're generating large amounts of data, and then this will come through to dashboarding. Now you're able to bring this effluent data back to monitoring and control. There's obviously companies out there who also dabble in operation and maintenance of, say, treatment plants. Now you can sit, and people do, at their laptops and actually operate plants remotely, right? So now that we have shown clients that we are able to operate remotely, be productive, I think clients will be more open to suggestions from us as the trusted advisor to open themselves up to digital dashboarding, make it clear to them that it's an initial cost, but ultimately it will save you operational cost when it comes to the life cycle of the project. And again, back to data, making data available to everyone. One of the issues I've seen is clients often sit with information in their office, like we've done in the past. When we do digital dashboarding and make it available for everyone, everyone is able to see that we need to make these changes, and the guys on site are then able to make those changes. When we look at another question, when we look at scheduling times, we are now able to ensure that we are more productive for specific times of the day. And now we are able to have a more balanced work life as a professional, and you are able to spend more time with your family and with your friends. I personally have a lot of people who have contacted me and said they actually prefer working from 4 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock, arrange their children, sort out their schoolwork, and then carry on working after that. So yeah, thank you, Nelson.
Okay, thank you very much. Nick, I have a question for you. This is not from the floor. This is just picking up issue. I mean, with your staff all over the world and the transformation you made, you make a comment to say United States and UK, it wasn't that difficult, but India, you had to look at, how do you get your hardware and your software system operational there. Is it one about cultural issue, or is it just about time to market? Because I would have thought India would be straight ahead on technology issue. So how do you manage to cope with that, and within a very short period actually being able to put all the system in place and you can back into operation? Nick?
So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know whether it is cultural or not really. Safe to say though that a lot of our employees didn't have the software or the hardware at home to be able to work, and that's because they're always expected to work from the office. And I don't know the actual reason for that. So I think this will change, and it will be no matter where you're located in the globe, people will have to be expected to be able to work from wherever they are and not specifically from the office. Now, as I said earlier, how we dealt with this, I think this would usually taken us a whole year to give people the laptops they needed, make sure they had the broadband at home they needed. But even bigger issue was that they didn't have access to a lot of the software. So we had to set up the cloud networks in effect that could allow the people to actually work from home. Now, something that would probably take us a year, we managed to spin and get everyone up and running within 2 weeks. So it just goes to show what you can really do to make that change quickly. So I'm not quite sure on the cultural, but it was definitely an issue we had out of our India office, which we didn't have in countries such as, in Europe or in the US.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Nick. I mean, the other question I want to put to the floor, really, I mean, we're now talking about we can work flexible because all our data are now based on cloud system. What happens if the cloud fail? What is the backup, what comfort we actually give to the client and to ourselves in terms of business continuity? Perhaps if I start with Richard, and go around the floor. So how do you deal with the potential issue that if the cloud system fail, do you have a backup, or do you have to sort of rely on, what do you rely on if the whole thing fail? Richard?
Yeah, so we have I guess a global IT system which deals with that. So I'm not the IT expert, Nelson. So, to give you details of exactly how they're backing up the cloud is not something I can really help you with. Our IT people deal with that, and it's not my specialist area.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to call on Dustin because obviously you are doing this globally. And I know that, you're working for clients, you're working for collaboration platform. You're also talking about building digital twin of having all this data somehow in the cloud system. So I just wonder, how do you deal with this? What sort of a contingency or backup plan do you have in place to give confidence? Because what I hear from the floor are people saying it's interesting that we are now helping our client to migrate into the digital world. I hear that in all the comments. We are now helping our client to manage workshop, and Nick said that we're doing all of that to get client into our new world. So how do we give ourselves that confidence and comfort that we have business continuity with this sort of cloud system? Back to you, Dustin.
Yeah, that's a good question, and this does come up a lot with our customers around the world. The biggest thing that we do to ensure that data is backed up is we partner with really strong partners that have a strong contingency plan, like Microsoft, like Alibaba Cloud, Amazon, and others who have a very strong fallover backup system. So in fact, if you look at statistically, if you look at cloud-based storage and cloud-based systems versus your own on-premise, the uptime, the backup security, the security protocols, all of that is way more secure and has way more uptime than what you could actually provide yourself. And it's definitely more cost effective to do it as well.
Okay, I see Michele, you raise your hand. Michele, were you waiting to contribute into the subject? You mute, okay, fine, okay, right. So the question I was going to put across into Adam, I think there was a question that came through from the floor, if I can just pick it up. This is what to do with how do you motivate your staff to be able to be agile and move into this change that is going through. Adam, that's the question.
Well, to be honest with you, we didn't do any deliberate motivational tool, so to speak. What happened is that we implemented remote working once a week a year and a half ago after reading an article about how Microsoft limited the amount of hours people can spend in their office. So we went, let's say, well, if Bill Gates thinks it's a good idea, we might as well try. And so that's what we did. And then after COVID happened, they already had the experience of working remotely for a year and a half. And it was really a smooth transition that exceeded our expectations. So I don't really have an answer how to motivate them, but we monitor statistics from the system as tasks completed, and of course whether items on projects are overdue longer than 7 days, for example, some action items and so on. But that's normal project management like we would do regardless of COVID, let's say.
Okay, there's a question from the floor. I'm not sure whether Nick is saying it, from George Ionides. He said to Mr. Nick, how does the implementation of remote work affect the possibility for outsourcing part of work to external employees and consultants nationally and internationally? And he goes on to say, are we proceeding into a globalization of the hiring talent pool? In another word, we've been talking about going global, and if you have this technology that allows you to outsource work, does this mean that you can actually employ anybody anywhere around the world and get them to work for you without having to have a permanent office? Big question. Nick?
So the answer is yes. And on a small scale, I live in rural southwest Wales, where, for those who don't know, Wales is part of the UK. And I've been spending my life on the train back and forth to London. And it's been absolutely fabulous not to have to spend all my time doing that and delivering exactly the same as I was delivering before, whether it's doing this fabulous webinar with yourselves or actually writing a report or whatever it may be. So it just shows that we don't all have to be located in one office. And that's the same then globally. Does it matter that I sit in Swansea or you sit in Johannesburg or wherever you may be sitting? So I think the answer to that is yes. I think there's a really good question that relates to this that somebody posed that I just read, is what happens where you haven't got good internet connection? And that is a really good point. And I think my answer to that is governments needs to change how they're spending their priorities on infrastructure. So governments where their digital infrastructure is weak should be, if they've only got a finite pot of money, should they be diverting money from other infrastructure programs into their digital technology, whether it's 5G or whether it's broadband connectivity? My answer would be probably yes, because otherwise those people in those countries won't be able to do the work and sell to the UK, for instance, that other countries could.
It's interesting, Nick, that you mentioned that, because we had a board meeting on Thursday and Friday, and one of the time we spent within the board, I'm sure Bill can contribute into this, we spent some time to look at the big issue impacting and what are the area of investment, because we now pick up that, we said government is one that's going to bail out the industry because the wealth creation machine has stopped for the last 3-4 months. And if that's going to be the case, where do we want the government to channel their energy in? Some board member talked about, yes, infrastructure, hard infrastructure. Some talk about soft infrastructure. And we have some board members say, I think we've moved on. It should be 5G, AI, and these are the big infrastructure area, because if we have them available, then actually we can work globally without having to move from where we are, because these are now critical infrastructure. So the question I was going to actually put back onto maybe to Bill, because he was leading us in that question. For FIDIC to move forward, yes, while we need to talk about social infrastructure and economic infrastructure, and by definition, social infrastructure are the education, the schools, the hospitals, and all of the things we need to do with. What I call the economic infrastructure, the airport, the road, and all of that to go with. But somehow there's this new digital infrastructure that is being spoken about. The question for us is, how do we engage government to think outside the box and to put energy into that rather than having to wait until crisis come through? Now, how do we move that on? Bill, do you want to contribute to the conversation?
Sure. Thank you, Nelson. And that's the answers can be somewhat overwhelming. When you mention the infrastructure choices, we have a huge infrastructure problem around the globe. Countries, with very, very few exceptions, have historically not been spending enough money to maintain or build the infrastructure that they need. And that's the hard infrastructure. We heard in our board meeting that some countries are chatting a lot more about, I guess, for lack of a better term, the soft infrastructure, which is certainly important. And where I connect the 4G and 5G, and please don't ask me to even define what that stuff is, but when I hear about it, I connect that immediately with the opportunity to reduce the cost of infrastructure that needs to be built. And the lots of organizations all around the world have mandates and goals to get the cost of infrastructure down so that we can more realistically deal with the massive problems that we have. So there's real opportunities here to use remote learning, drones, et cetera, to reduce all elements of the cost of infrastructure, and that's certainly a good thing. The other element of this that ties to what I'd love to see FIDIC doing more of is informing the world, educating the world about the needs for infrastructure. And prior to COVID-19, we'd be talking about water, all elements of water, transportation, energy. And now, on top of that, we're talking about medical facilities. If we're not careful, the need for medical facilities will almost swamp, if you will, the other critical needs for infrastructure. We heard in the international finance institutions just last week that monies, for very good reason, may be transferred from planned hard infrastructure like transportation and water into medical facilities to deal with future pandemics. That's a good thing, but we need to do all of this. The final thought, I'm just making a closing remark, is we've thought in the board meeting about updating our State of the World reports and making them a lot more user-friendly, using social media and that kind of thing. And I know Michele can relate to this because she was very much involved with me in the State of the World for Water. And we are going to be implementing an initiative to find all sorts of ways to communicate with the global community all the needs for infrastructure related to climate change, related to sanitation, to water, transportation, medical facilities, energy, everything. So there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of things for us to do. I apologize for taking so much time, but there's so much involved with that question, Nelson, that
It's okay. It's
at
okay.
least in my mind.
In fact, I have a question for Michele. I mean, again, this guy from Gordon, he said, Dr. Kruger, there is an urgent need to move from a document-centric environment to a data-centric environment. How ready are the various stakeholders, particularly in Africa and South Africa, government, large, small, and medium consulting engineering company, to make this move, investment in software that is sizable and meet the needs of the industry? The question is, what is the willingness of companies, particularly emerging markets such as Africa, to move from status quo to the new way of thinking? Because we talked about, yes, it is an investment. Is it a front-end investment that will yield something in the medium to long term, or do we need to actually educate the client to understand the value proposition that this new investment will yield? What's your take, Michele?
So I think it's all about data integrity. One of the issues I've seen is when clients are regularly using Excel spreadsheets instead of real-time data. Often you'll then find that clients work with dated information, dated pricing. So when they're trying to find funding for infrastructure, oftentimes this is data that was relevant, say, 3 or 4 years ago. Once again, clients then get accused of going over budget. But obviously, if your initial cost estimate was 5 or 10 years ago, then you will go over budget when you take into consideration inflation. So that's something I see quite often. So when we in emerging countries then talk about data and can convince the client around the need for this, it's actually then easier to convince the client to invest, and that investment then can run out a bit faster. So then it all turns around into what is the information technology policy of the client. Those are then also a bit easier to convince the client to update their policies and implement, shall we say, more secure infrastructure, because typically the infrastructure that they have the initial infrastructure is typically not as secure. So something I also wanted to add is the fact that if you are struggling with internet connectivity, something that I can recommend, and I've seen here as well, is if you have electricity cuts, internet connection, sorry, I have one fly bugging me here. So when we have cut in connectivity, there are often internet hubs or data hubs where you'll find high-speed connectivity available, something that might be a change coming in the future, especially when you think of engineering and infrastructure. I foresee that these hubs will then also make available printing facilities for engineers, say for large prints if that's required, or computers with extra data processing powers so that you can use software that need extra memory, for example. So I see in the emerging countries that every person might not have access to connectivity, electricity, but maybe in these hubs, you'll have access to these items.
Okay, thank you very much, Michele. I hear a lot of comments on the floor. One from Ibikunle Ogunbayo. I think the comment was, we've invested in IT in our country over the years, and we were ready for COVID, and we're going to make information available to FIDIC. So thank you very much for your comment on that. There are comments from the floor as well to do with, yes, maybe the COVID-19 is help to show the benefit that consulting can work, practically from anywhere around the world and deliver the services. But how do you apply that to contracting? Because you really have to be on site. And I just wonder, you know, if anybody wishes to pick that up. Consulting, yes, you can work around the world, you can do inspecting, but actually the contracting sector where we have to deliver that, how do we take, you know, the remote work into that level? Nick, what's your experience in that?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And I think this is where the digital rehearsal piece comes is so important in this. And you can wrap this into the digital twin. So is it a digital twin for the design to construction element? And I would argue that it probably is, if you're looking at the design against the actual. So how do we can actually reduce the amount of people that need to go on site. So if you think about a railway line, people go on trackside and measure things, for instance, and go and check, and they found some information wrong, so they leave, and then they need to come back and forth, etc. And we're trying to reduce the amount of people who go on the tracks because obviously it's dangerous. With your digital twin, if you call it that, you can do the digital rehearsal to actually measure stuff, but actually plan, do your 4D sequencing, and we do that between engineers and contractors. That's reducing the need to go on site. And also then we can look at how we use these tools to actually plan social distancing, for instance. So how can I actually operate that? How many operatives do I need to do a specific job on site? Where do they need to be located? What's their walking paths? So I think a huge opportunity to digital twin, and also, which we're already using, is we're using robotics. So some of the diggers we're using on site are taking the data directly from the BIM and the GIS, the geospatial data, and actually doing the work without human intervention. So we need humans to be on site, most definitely, but we can make it we can potentially use less people, but we can actually use the right people at the right time is the important point.
Right. Thank you very much, Nick. There's a lot of questions about modality. One of the questions is, how do you encourage people to work remote? Do you need a new contract from their normal employment contract? I do not believe so. I think it's about, you know, people responding to the situation they find themselves. There's an issue to do clarify the platform using for personal as against, you know, professional. So there's a lot of questions coming through, but I'm just mindful of the time. We're coming towards the end, and we've got about 10 minutes to wrap up. At this point in time, what I want to do is just try and bring it up. And I really want to thank everybody from the participants who are throwing questions at us. All these questions are being captured. We'll look at it again. But I want to go around across, you know, to each panelist and really ask them. Michele, you know, just be mindful, because I may ask you to just give me a summary of quick where we are. So I'm going to start off with Adam. So looking through the challenges that we've gone through the COVID-19 and whether it's going to be a V situation, it comes and go, or we may have a U, it comes and it drag on before we get back to business as usual. Or we may be a W, it comes shut in and back again, because all sorts of scenarios are being talked about. The question for us as a federation and how we're looking at supporting our members and the industry, and you know very well what we do, which is to produce best guide, support our industry, make sure collaboration is the big one rather than everybody fighting each other. You know, what would be your advice to FIDIC as to what other things we should be looking at in one sentence? I'll start off with Adam. What would be your advice to FIDIC on what we could look at in the near future?
Okay, thank you for your question. I think the programs that are in FIDIC right now is just promoting them even more via internet. Maybe social media can still go up a notch. I think this webinar has been a great experience for everybody, and especially the COVID guidance memorandum issued for CEOs, and what the contract committee issued about force majeure was great. And advertising this future leaders to participate in the training programs, the networking element. I think there could be a similar webinar conducted for maybe a certain networking way to facilitate connection between small and medium businesses. This is something that FIDIC can do, especially in this COVID time. I know creative marketing has been an issue that our company is facing with, because, you know, you can't go around pitching clients anymore as flexible as it used to be. So maybe some guidance here would be helpful for me personally, but that's just one person. So I'm not
Thank
sure.
you very much. I'm going to ask Nick. Now, Nick, a big firm, big footprint around the world. a lot of clients around the world, what should we be looking at as an organization? When I talk about an organization, including your firm as part of the industry leader, what should we be looking at and try to do to help the industry moving forward? We are not alone in this world. We have to work together. So what's your advice to FIDIC?
I think it's the clients. I think where I'd be saying is please, please, please work with clients. Please help them get to this new digital norm, because what you find from the supply chain is if the client is got their information requirements right, their data requirements right, we'll all fall into place and we'll deliver what they want. And as you can see, we've moved heaven and earth to keep going. So the client is key to this. The one big success, I've seen in my working lifetime was the BIM mandate from the UK government, where they said, we're going to do BIM, and we pushed it. And it made a whole industry change and adopt. My view is they didn't push it long enough or hard enough. So it hasn't had quite the adoption we want it to do. So how can FIDIC work with those clients to actually help them to have plans about taking what is now and making that business as usual?
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm going to go into Dustin. What's your take on it? What's takeaway? What's takeaway for FIDIC? I understand working with the client. I understand promoting what we're doing. What else?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting if you fast forward just a few weeks, a few months, even a year, to kind of figure out the journey that a lot of these different organizations, whether they be large multinational engineering or contractors to small, mid-size, actually to policymakers and government entities on the owner-operator side, to kind of figure out what is their interpretation of digital transformation and what is the journey they actually have gone on through this period of time. We're all kind of predicting that this digital transformation has gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour, and so we're expecting rapid organizational transformation to actually take place. So I think to look back and do a post-mortem on this and understand how it impacted organizations with different profiles, from the large to the small, to the government, to the private sector, I think would be very beneficial.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I think I'm going to go across into his, if I call Nick, Nick is right there. I think it's Richard. Richard, you need to unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nelson. I think the thing that I think needs a lot of examination is adaptability. So we're talking about having adapted a lot recently, but there's an ongoing thing about adaptability because we don't really know what the future is going to be like. And for large programs, especially large infrastructure programs, we're quite used to trying to make a prediction of what we think things are going to be, the demand's going to be like in even 10 years' time, and start building something. And even by the time you're halfway through, the demand patterns themselves may have changed. Now, we were talking earlier about infrastructure, and I think any of us can probably reasonably predict that the actual demand for transportation infrastructure is going to come out of this different, which means that some of the big programs are going to need to be reviewed. Where do we place our investment? Uncertainty as a principle is a given, and that's just been highlighted really recently, but it was already apparent. So what does adaptability mean? What's the theory of adaptability? What can FIDIC do? Well, there are a lot of things in contractual relationships which are to do with adaptability. And how do we deal with the fact that there may be justifiable changes in demand patterns which actually change what the project of objectives might be partway through the project? And then if we bring in the digital angle, which is kind of fundamental to our conversation today, data and information has got a key role to play in giving us better vision of things as they change, because the more up-to-date and accurate the data that we've got is, including social data, usage data, then the quicker we are going to be able to spot changes in social demand patterns and therefore adapt our infrastructure, sometimes at planning stage, but sometimes possibly even when it's being built, and certainly when it's already been built, because if we can adapt things through life, then that's going to have a much lower carbon impact than knocking them down and restarting every time. So I think there's a whole kind of through life and digital angle and a contractual angle around the theory of adaptability.
Thanks very much, Richard. Michele, just one sentence or two sentences to wrap up from your point of view.
From my point of view, I think, as has just been said, adaptability is going to be key. And it's also going to be important when you look at staff retention, trying to attract those star performers to your company, retaining them, because ultimately the young staff are going to start requesting to be working from home, have more adaptable schedules. And I think in future, it's not should we, but we must.
Okay, thank you very much, Michele. I mean, just to try and sum up, we've run 6 programs. This is the 7th one. And in my closing sum, I'll probably try to say that, the world that we're going to see in future is going to be a major change. We will have a new normal. Things that will take, maybe 5 years to achieve will probably be achieved in a week in the new world that we're moving on. The 5G is going to change the way we work as an industry. And quite clearly, the speakers and the panel speakers talked about, yes, we need as an organization, need to engage with government to make sure government policy and program which come through, such as, BIM implementation, we push that forward. That comes into advocacy. I hear the word that, the transition and transformation journey that the world is going through. It would be good to capture that and see what lesson has been learned about that. The big word that I pick up is also about, creative marketing, which is how do we use this opportunity to connect our industry with the stakeholders so that there's a better understanding. I hear the word that, we need to work closer to the client, help the client to understand the changes that is going on in the industry and make sure we help them to actually transform from the current status into the future area. Adaptability is a big one, which I think Richard talked about, and this is quite big. Contractual relationship, change to the demand, and the flexibility that we can bring to bear on bringing a project to a fruition. And I hear the word, if I have to close out, that data is going to be the real gold in the future, that we need to mine data to help us look at performance of our activities and performance of our work. And also using dashboard is going to be a critical point in closing out. Well, at this point in time, we've been extremely lucky to have quite a lot of people online after 1.5 hours. I want to use this opportunity to thank everybody, and particularly all our panel speakers and also our president for giving time, from Michele to Adam to Nick and to Dustin, and also to Richard, who's supporting us. Thank you very much for your time. On Thursday, we'll be looking at managing employment relationship, employee and health and safety requirement. This will look at the whole wider context of the soft side of this COVID-19 and see how best we can move that forward. On this particular note, I'd like to say thank you to all the participants all over the world, wherever you are. Thank you for supporting FIDIC initiative. I hope you are keeping well and keeping safe. And I ask that you join us on Thursday and in the week after on the next program. So thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.